Hi there. Welcome to the very first R lab for INFO640. We are going to get started with this lab by just getting acquainted with R. By the end of this lab, you're going to be comfortable using R as a complex calculator. And while that is not all that R can do, really the point here is just to get acquainted and just to kind of like get a feel for RStudio. So we are going to exclusively use RStudio. RStudio has a ton of help features. It has a lot of autocomplete and a lot of things that just make learning and using R a whole lot easier. So by now you should have opened up your RStudio and you should be looking at a screen really similar to the one that I'm looking at right now. You have 4 quadrants here. You have the script that you're going to write. You have the terminal down here. You have the environment up here. This is where all your variables are going to be. And then you have a viewer. This is where like files, help, different plots that you make are going to be located. Okay. So when we come to this interface, what we're looking at is an interpreter for R. RStudio is probably the most popular interpreter, but it's still an interpreter. So we are going to write R, and you can write R in a variety of different environments. And then you save it as a .R file. So you could write R out in like Sublime or a text editor like that, and then open it up in RStudio to run it. Or you can run R in a variety of different programs. The purpose of this is not to make you an R expert. The purpose of this is to make sure that you can use R at a very basic level in order to do some data analysis. So we are only going to use RStudio. All right, so there's 2 places where you can write R code. The first place is you can write code in the console. So if you just want to do something really quick and get an answer, you can write your R down here in the bottom left, down here in the console. I'm going to write 2 plus 3. And this is just 2, the plus sign 3, hit enter, and you get out 5. You actually get out this brackets 1, 5. This is telling you that the first vector is 5. Don't worry about that at all right now. What that means is that the answer to your first question is 5. So notice that our sentence here, so I'm going to call lines of code sentences, just because I think it's a little bit easier to talk about programming languages in a similar way that we talk about human languages. All right, so you'll notice here that after we ran this sentence, we got another little left-hand point. This is our prompt, and it's telling us, hey, I'm ready for another line of code. If you ever get a plus sign here, that means that your sentence was not completed. And RStudio is saying, hey, this is an incomplete sentence. I don't know what to do from here. So you need to go back and revisit the sentence and figure out what is missing. Okay, so we're going to keep working in the console for just a second, and we're going to set a variable. Now, in R and in all programming languages, you're going to use variables all the time. Variables are things that stand in for other things. We're going to show a simple example now, but as the semester progresses, you'll see how variables are so useful. All right, so the first one we're going to say is x is equal to 4. Now, if you know another programming language, you might be going, hey, wait a minute, why did you use that weird symbol and not just an equal sign? Well, this is probably one of the biggest visual differences of R from languages such as, say, Python, is that you don't actually use an equals sign. You use this, less than and then the dash signs to assign your variable. Okay, so we've assigned x to 4, or 4 is x. Hit enter, nothing happens, or nothing happened down here. Notice that up here in your global environment, you have now x and 4. What your global environment tells you is all of the variables that you've already created. This is incredibly useful if you're like, why is my code not running? And then you're like, oh, right, I assigned that variable name twice. True story, happens to me. So if you're having major problems, right, and you're like, your code just isn't running and you can't figure it out, it's probably due to something up here. You probably need to sweep your variables. But before we get there, let me show you something else. All right, we're going to go back down here into the console, and we're going to go x plus 2. And what do you think x plus 2 is going to be? If you guess 6, you are right. So this just has, we have our variable, x is equal to 4, and 4 plus 2 is 6. Cool. All right. Now, let's say we are deep into our program. Let's say this is late in the semester and like something is just not running and you're totally frustrated. Go over here, sweep your variables. Number 1 pro tip. Click yes. Now you notice that your environment is empty. Fantastic. All right. Now let's check to make sure that worked. Now let's go x plus 2. Do you have any guesses what this is going to be? It's going to be an error, because R no longer knows what x is. You've swept your variables. So if you ever need to do this, you will end up rerunning your code. So this is like kind of the most basic version of R. It really is just a great big calculator. We aren't going to use the calculator very much, but if you remember your order of operations from, I don't know, middle school or something, then you're going to be totally fine. If you do want to use it as a calculator, go ahead and go to the textbook. Right at the very beginning is all of the operators that you will need to make R be a calculator. So we are going to move out of the console here, because anything that you write in the console is not saved. And that can be really frustrating if you've written a whole big program and you've written it all down in the console and you just can't save it. So in general, you're going to write your R up here in an R script. And it's going to save wherever R is running. This is probably in the root directory of your computer. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is look at a couple of character types. The first, we'll make a new variable, and we'll call it mynum, and mynum is equal to 2 over 2. All right, and then I hit enter and nothing happens. So hitting enter here just takes me to the next line. I'll show you how to run in just a second. We're going to have my character. We're going to set that equal to hi! Exclamation point. And then we're going to have my bool, and we're going to set that equal to true. All right, so we have 3 character types here. We have a number, 2 divided by 2, it's going to be 1. We have a character, hi, and we have a Boolean, true. Booleans are only true and false. Characters are strings. All right, so I want to save all of these into my environment. I'm going to select them all, and I'm going to click run. And if I do that, then it runs all 3 of these lines all at once. And you notice that you know that they ran because it appeared down here in the console. Sometimes you might think that you ran something and it didn't actually run. The other thing that you can do, if you want to run one line, is go to the end of the line and you can use the shortcut. So you can hit Command Enter or Command Return, and that will run just that line of code. You can use the Command Return shortcut for if you select them all also. It's just a little bit easier. All right, so we're going to go and we're going to ask R the type of all of these functions. All right, so we're going to say type of, and I'm going to pass my num. You'll notice that R is being very, very helpful here. I type the word type and it gives me the options of what starts with type, and then I type my underscore and it gives me all of the variables that are stored as my underscore. So very useful. If you are anything like me and you often forget what things are called, then this will be basically your best friend, because it's really, really helpful. All right, so I'm going to select all of these, hit Command Enter, and this tells me that my type of my number is called a double. So R calls them doubles. We're not going to get too much into why that is. Type of my character is characters, and my Boolean is logical, because it's binary logical. Okay. You'll always get your answers down here, unless you're making a chart, in which case you'll get your answers over here. All right. So there's one more special object that you're going to come across, and that's null values. So I'm going to do my NaN, and I'm going to assign it to 0 over 0. And I'm sure you know what 0 divided by 0 is. It is not a real number whatsoever. So I'm going to ask R to print to the screen my NaN. Highlight both of these, run them. All right, so it prints NaN. Type of doesn't actually work for this. You'll see, no. My NaN. It calls it a double because it thinks that it's a number, but actually it's nothing. So what is going to happen is when you read in a data set from other places, you're going to have null variables. There's going to be things that are just missing. So it's really, really normal in dealing with data. And that data is going to be represented as NaN. It's something that you'll have to deal with, and there are really powerful ways to deal with it that we'll look at in the data manipulation lab. So these are all built-in functions, but generally you are going to want to use R as much more than a calculator. It's so much more powerful than that. You're going to want to draw on pre-made packages, and in almost every lab we are going to use the tidyverse. A lot of data analysis rotates around the tidyverse. The name comes from the idea of tidy data, which we'll talk about later in the semester. R has a huge development community. So there are literally thousands of packages. You can load all of Jane Eyre's novels as a package if you wanted to do analysis on Jane Eyre's novels. The analogy that I always make in terms of R or in terms of Python or any programming language is that if you think about a human language, you have the structure and the vocabulary. So for example, if you've learned German recently, you know the structure. So you know the structure of German, but you probably don't know how to say everything. But with a little bit of studying, you could essentially dump a politics dictionary into your head. The same thing is happening with R. So R is the structure. You're going to get more familiar with the structure as the semester progresses, but we're going to be relying on a lot of packages. The packages are the vocabulary. They give us all this new language and all this new functionality to do different things like R, to do different things in R. So R is like our skeleton. It has some structure, some basic vocabulary, but to make it useful, you're going to import packages. So let's install and import our very first package. For this part, you have to be connected to the internet. So we are going to type install.packages, and we are going to pass tidyverse. All right, and we're going to go ahead and run that. What happens for you should be slightly different than what happens for me, since I already have it installed. It'll install it in the default location. You probably got a lot more red text. As long as you end up with this prompt down here at the end and you don't get an error message, then you are good to go. So now we've installed the package and we never have to do that ever again. But every time you want to use the package, you have to say, hey, give me the tidyverse library. So we're going to call library, and then we're going to call tidyverse. All right, we'll run that. And this tells you, hey, all of these packages were also loaded. So Dippler was loaded, and string R and ggplot2 were all loaded at the same time as loading the tidyverse. Actually not going to use the tidyverse in this lab. However, you will use it in every other lab. So as long as you didn't get an error here and you just get a bunch of warning messages, you are all good. Now, couple last notes. If you ever want to write a note to yourself, and I am here to tell you from personal experience, you should write many notes to yourself. Clear and coherent comments are not only good code, but it's also just a really kind thing to do for your future self. Even though right now you might know exactly what you're doing, your future self will have no idea whatsoever. So we did one little tricky thing in our code here, right? We created a null variable in not the most direct way. You don't need to write a note for yourself for installing packages or calling the library, but let's say you're using this my nan equals 0 over 0. That's a little bit abstract. So I'm going to say creates a null variable. And then I'm going to say my nan is equal to 0 over 0. Right? And since we've put a hashtag in front of our comment, R completely ignores it, right? It just prints it to the screen and says, hey, this is something that you wrote. This is meant for humans to read, not for computers to read. So if you had done the same thing without that, you get an error. You get this unexpected symbol here, right? So please write many notes to yourself about exactly what you're doing, because in 1 week, 1 month, the end of the semester, you are going to completely forget why you were doing what you were doing. All right. Last thing that we're going to talk about is the help pages. The help pages are amazing. So when we deal with data, we'll deal with the help pages then. But for today, we're going to deal with the help pages for functions. If you ever forget the exact name of the command that you are looking for, all you have to do is type help and then just something similar. So help type, and it brings up the type, what it does. So it tells you the type of an object, the usage, type of, and I pass it just one variable, and what things you could possibly get out. This is incredibly helpful. True story, when I was writing this lab, I completely forgot how you do type of in R because I switch between programming languages. And I was like, I don't remember how you do this, and it's really basic. So I typed help type, because it's something about type. So this will be incredibly useful to you as you go forward. All right, and that is it. Congratulations. So now you know how to write code in an R script up here, how to write code in the console down here to just try things out, what's going on in your global environment, and what is the purpose of this corner down here. Last thing we need to do is save our script. So I'm going to click save, and it tells me untitled, and I have R installed at my root, hence my initials here. You can save this wherever you want to. I'm going to save it in my desktop, and then I'm going to put it into my labs, and you save it just like normal. All right, so all right, congratulations. You can now write and save our code, and if you went out and found this file, double-clicked on it, it would open up in R by default. So our RStudio by default. So you would be able to start working on it again. All right, let me know if you have any questions. Please be sure to submit your R code. So the introduction.R Just for my own sanity, please put something about your name in it as well, just so I know whose code is whose when I download them all to my computer. All right, thank you much, and I'll see you at the next lab.